The coffee cup trembled in my hands as I stared at the computer screen, my entire world crumbling with each click of the mouse. There, illuminated by the harsh glow of my sister's laptop, was evidence that would destroy everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. The encrypted folder contained dozens of confidential client files, all downloaded under my login credentials, all sent to our biggest competitor, all orchestrated by the one person I trusted more than anyone else in this world. My sister Marissa, the woman who had held me while I sobbed, the woman who promised to clear my name, the woman who swore she would stand by me no matter what the investigation revealed. She was not my savior. She was my executioner, and I had been too blind to see the blade she held behind her back. My name is Camille, and until that moment, I believed that blood meant everything. I believed that family, especially sisters who shared the same childhood bedroom and whispered secrets under blanket forts, would protect each other against the world. I believed that no matter how dark things became, Marissa would be my lighthouse in the storm. But lighthouses are meant to guide ships safely to shore, not lure them onto the rocks. Growing up, I lived perpetually in Marissa's shadow, and I accepted it as naturally as one accepts the changing of seasons. She was 3 years older, infinitely more beautiful, and possessed a razor-sharp intelligence that could cut through any problem with surgical precision. Teachers adored her. Boys lined up for her attention. Our parents spoke of her with a pride that made their voices glow with warmth and possibility. I was the quiet one, the dependable one, the sister who cleaned up the broken glass when Marissa's parties got too wild, who covered for her when she snuck out to meet boys our parents would never approve of, who helped her cheat on tests she was too busy socializing to study for. I told myself these acts of service were born from love, not desperation. I told myself that being needed was the same as being valued. When we both graduated from law school, me from a respectable state university, her from Harvard with honors, I felt a flutter of hope that perhaps we might finally stand on equal ground. When we both received offers from Patterson, Clark and Associates, one of the city's most prestigious law firms, I dared to believe that this was our chance to be sisters, not just a star in her supporting cast. The firm was everything I had dreamed of during those grueling years of studying, until my eyes burned and my fingers cramped from typing endless briefs. Marble floors that echoed with the footsteps of powerful people making decisions that shaped lives and fortunes. Floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the city skyline, reminding everyone who worked there that they had risen above the masses. Conference rooms where million-dollar deals were negotiated with the same casual ease that others might discuss the weather. I threw myself into the work with a devotion that bordered on obsession. While other junior associates complained about the 70-hour weeks and the impossible deadlines, I embraced them as opportunities to prove myself worthy of the golden nameplate I hoped would one day grace my office door. I arrived before the sun rose, and left long after the cleaning crews had finished their rounds. I memorized case law that others skimmed. I drafted briefs so meticulously researched and eloquently written that senior partners began requesting me specifically for their most challenging cases. Marissa, meanwhile, seemed to glide through the firm like she was born to inhabit its halls. She charmed clients with her radiant smile and quick wit. She networked at firm events with the natural grace of someone who had never met a stranger. While I buried myself in legal precedents and statutory interpretations, she cultivated relationships that would serve her well as her career ascended to heights I could only imagine. But I did not resent her success. I celebrated it, because I genuinely believed that her victories were also mine. We were the Morrison sisters, a formidable team that could conquer the legal world together. When she received praise for a brilliant cross-examination, I felt my chest swell with pride. When clients specifically requested her representation, I told myself that her reputation reflected well on our shared DNA. For 2 years we worked side by side, and I allowed myself to believe that we had finally found our rhythm as equals. We would grab lunch together in the firm's executive dining room, analyzing cases and gossiping about office politics with the easy intimacy of siblings who had weathered childhood storms together. We celebrated each other's victories and commiserated over defeats. When I landed my first major client, Marissa took me out for champagne and toasted to my brilliance with tears of joy glistening in her eyes. I should have known it was too perfect to last. The summons came on a Tuesday morning in March. Margaret Patterson, one of the founding partners, called me into her office with a voice so devoid of warmth that I felt ice crystallizing in my veins before I even knocked on her door. I assumed it was about the Henderson merger I had been working on for months. Perhaps they were finally ready to promote me to senior associate, or maybe they wanted to discuss my involvement in the firm's pro bono program. Instead, Margaret's face was carved from stone as she gestured for me to sit across from her imposing mahogany desk. The morning light streaming through her windows seemed harsh and accusatory, casting shadows that made her features appear almost demonic. "Camille," she began, her voice carrying the weight of judgment and disappointment, "we have received information suggesting that you have been engaged in activities that violate your employment contract and potentially constitute criminal behavior." The words hit me like physical blows, each syllable driving the air from my lungs and leaving me gasping for comprehension. Criminal behavior? The most illegal thing I had ever done was accidentally taking a pen home from the office supply closet. "I do not understand," I managed to whisper, my voice sounding foreign and small in the vast expanse of her office. Margaret slid a manila folder across the desk with the same mechanical precision of a judge delivering a death sentence. Inside were printouts of confidential client documents, emails to competing firms, and bank records showing payments to an account that allegedly belonged to me. "These documents were obtained from our server using your login credentials," Margaret continued, each word falling like a hammer blow on the coffin of my career. "Our investigation has revealed a pattern of corporate espionage spanning the past 6 months. Confidential client information has been systematically leaked to our competitors, resulting in lost business worth millions of dollars." I stared at the evidence spread before me, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. The documents were real. I recognized several cases I had worked on personally. But the emails, the payments, the elaborate network of betrayal, none of it made sense. I would never, could never, engage in such devastating treachery against the firm that had given me everything I had worked for my entire adult life. "Margaret, I swear to you on everything I hold sacred, I did not do this," I pleaded, hearing the desperation creep into my voice like poison. "Someone is setting me up. This is not who I am. You know me. You know I would never." "What I know," Margaret interrupted with the cold finality of a guillotine blade, "is that the evidence is overwhelming and irrefutable. Effective immediately, you are suspended without pay pending the completion of our internal investigation. If criminal charges are filed, the firm will cooperate fully with law enforcement. Security will escort you from the building within the hour." The world tilted on its axis. The prestigious office, the career I had sacrificed everything to build, the respect of colleagues I had worked so hard to earn. All of it evaporated like morning mist in the face of accusations I could not comprehend, much less defend against. I stumbled from Margaret's office in a daze, my legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. The hallways that had once felt like home now seemed hostile and alien. Colleagues who had smiled and chatted with me just hours earlier now averted their eyes and whispered behind their hands as I passed. The marble floors that had once echoed with the confident rhythm of my ambitions now seemed to mock me with each unsteady step. The security guard who escorted me to my office to collect my personal belongings was professional but distant, treating me like a dangerous criminal who might steal the stapler if left unattended. I packed my few personal items, a photo of our parents, a coffee mug Marissa had given me for my birthday, a small succulent plant that had somehow survived despite my neglect, into a cardboard box that felt like a coffin for my dreams. As I walked toward the elevator for what I assumed would be the last time, I saw her. Marissa stood near the reception desk, her face a masterpiece of concern and sisterly love. When our eyes met, she rushed toward me with tears streaming down her cheeks, her arms outstretched like she wanted to shield me from the entire world. "Oh, Camille," she whispered, wrapping me in an embrace that smelled of her expensive perfume, and felt like the only solid thing left in my collapsing universe. "I am so sorry this is happening to you. But we are going to fight this. I promise you. I will not rest until we clear your name and find out who really did this to you." Her words were a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. While everyone else had already condemned me based on circumstantial evidence and corporate paranoia, Marissa believed in my innocence with the fierce loyalty that had defined our relationship since childhood. She was my sister, my champion, my unwavering advocate in a world that had suddenly turned against me. I did not do this. I sobbed into her shoulder, my voice breaking with the weight of fear and confusion. Marissa, I swear I did not do this. Why would anyone want to destroy me like this? I know you did not, she murmured, stroking my hair with the same gentle touch she had used to comfort me through childhood nightmares. You are the most honest person I have ever known. Someone is using you as a scapegoat, and we are going to find out who. I have connections in the firm. I will ask questions, investigate quietly, and get to the bottom of this conspiracy. Her confidence was infectious. If Marissa believed in my innocence, if she was willing to put her own career on the line to defend me, then perhaps there was hope. Perhaps this nightmare would end with my vindication, and the real culprit exposed for the world to see. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations, private investigators, and sleepless nights spent staring at the ceiling and wondering how my life had spiraled so completely out of control. The firm's investigation continued with the methodical thoroughness of a military operation, and each day brought new evidence that seemed to implicate me further. My bank account showed deposits I had never made. My computer had browser history I had never created. Witnesses came forward claiming they had seen me in places I had never been, at times when I could not account for my whereabouts. The web of evidence was so intricate and comprehensive that even I began to question my own memory and sanity. But through it all, Marissa remained my constant source of strength and support. She visited me daily, bringing food and encouragement and updates on her behind-the-scenes investigation. She held me when the panic attacks struck in the middle of the night, leaving me gasping and shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. She researched employment lawyers and character witnesses, and every possible avenue for fighting back against the accusations that threatened to destroy not just my career, but my entire sense of self. I spoke with David in IT today, she would report, settling beside me on my couch with the dedication of a war correspondent. He mentioned that someone with administrative access could easily manipulate the server logs to make it look like the files were downloaded from your account. We are getting closer to the truth, Camille. I can feel it. Or, I had lunch with Jennifer from Human Resources. She let slip that they received an anonymous tip about your alleged activities. Someone wanted you to be caught, which means this was planned and deliberate. We just need to figure out who had both the motive and the means to orchestrate something this elaborate. Her investigation gave structure to my days and purpose to my suffering. While the walls of my apartment seemed to close in around me like a prison cell, while former colleagues crossed the street to avoid speaking to me, while my reputation crumbled to dust in the legal community I had worked so hard to join, Marissa was my beacon of hope in an ocean of despair. She even offered to testify on my behalf when the firm's investigation moved toward its conclusion. I will tell them about your character, she promised, gripping my hands with fierce determination. I will tell them about the sister who stayed up all night helping me study for the bar exam, who has never told a lie that mattered, who would rather sacrifice her own success than hurt another person. They have to listen to family testimony. They have to consider that you are being framed. The night before her testimony, she took me out to dinner at our favorite restaurant, a small Italian place where we had celebrated every major milestone in our adult lives. She ordered a bottle of wine and raised her glass in a toast that brought tears to my eyes. To justice, she said, her voice ringing with conviction. To the truth that will set you free. To the sister bond that nothing can break, not even the most elaborate conspiracy. I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. The next morning, I waited in the lobby of Patterson, Clark and Associates while Marissa met with the investigating committee behind closed doors. I had not been allowed in the building since my suspension, but Margaret had granted special permission for me to wait while my character witness spoke on my behalf. The familiar marble floors and soaring ceilings that had once filled me with pride now felt like a mausoleum for my dreams. Former colleagues walked past without acknowledgement, their faces carefully neutral as they avoided making eye contact with the disgraced associate who had allegedly betrayed everything the firm stood for. But I held on to hope like a drowning woman clutches a piece of driftwood. Marissa was in that conference room fighting for me with the passion and eloquence that had made her one of the firm's rising stars. She would tell them who I really was beneath the manufactured evidence and false accusations. She would remind them that character matters more than circumstantial proof, that the sister they were destroying was incapable of the crimes she was accused of committing. As the hours ticked by, I imagined her passionate defense. I pictured the committee members nodding as she dismantled their case with surgical precision, their certainty crumbling in the face of her unwavering belief in my innocence. I envisioned the moment when they would call me back into the building, offer their apologies, and restore my career with the justice I had been denied. When the conference room doors finally opened, I held my breath and searched the faces of the committee members for signs of doubt, for cracks in their conviction that might indicate Marissa's testimony had made an impact. But their expressions remained professionally neutral, revealing nothing about the deliberations that would determine my fate. Then I saw her. Marissa emerged from the conference room with tears streaming down her face, her shoulders shaking with what I assumed was the emotional aftermath of defending me so passionately. She was escorted by 2 security guards, the same guards who had walked me out of the building weeks earlier. And their presence sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Our eyes met across the lobby, and in that moment, I saw something that made my blood freeze in my veins. It was not the exhaustion of someone who had fought valiantly for justice. It was not the frustrated sadness of an advocate whose best efforts had fallen on deaf ears. It was guilt. Raw, undeniable, soul-deep guilt that transformed her familiar features into those of a stranger. She knew that I knew. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. The extensive evidence that had been gathered so quickly and thoroughly. The anonymous tip that had started the investigation. The access to my computer and login credentials that someone would need to orchestrate such an elaborate frame job. The inside knowledge of firm procedures and client relationships that had made the setup so convincing. All of it pointed to someone with intimate knowledge of both my work habits and the firm's security protocols. Someone who had unrestricted access to the areas where the alleged crimes had taken place. Someone who knew me well enough to predict my reactions and manipulate my responses. Someone like my sister. The realization hit me like a physical blow, doubling me over with nausea and disbelief. While I had been crying on her shoulder about the injustice of my situation, she had been the architect of my destruction. While she had held me through panic attacks and promised to find the real culprit, she had been covering her tracks and reveling in the success of her betrayal. The security guards escorted her past me toward the exit, and as she drew near, I found my voice. Why? The word escaped my lips as barely more than a whisper, but it carried the weight of every sleepless night, every moment of terror, every shattered dream she had orchestrated. She paused for just a moment, her tear-stained face turning toward me with an expression I had never seen before. A mixture of triumph and regret that chilled me to the bone. Because I could, she whispered back, her voice so soft that only I could hear it. Because I deserved better than sharing the spotlight with someone who was never supposed to shine as bright as me. Then she was gone, led away by security while I stood frozen in the lobby, my entire understanding of family and loyalty and love crumbling around me like a house of cards in a hurricane. That evening, I drove to her apartment with hands that shook so violently I could barely grip the steering wheel. The spare key she had given me years ago, a symbol of trust and sisterly intimacy, felt like a weapon in my palm as I let myself into her space for what I knew would be the last time. Her laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, still logged into the encrypted folder I had glimpsed during that moment of terrible revelation. But now I looked deeper, clicked through files and emails and documents that painted a picture of betrayal so systematic and thorough that it took my breath away. For months, she had been downloading confidential client files using login credentials she had somehow obtained or duplicated. She had sold information to our competitors, not for money, but for promises of career advancement and partnership opportunities. She had orchestrated every aspect of my downfall with the methodical precision of a master chess player, anticipating my moves and countering them before I even knew I was playing a game. The most devastating discovery was a series of emails between Marissa and executives at Hartwell and Associates, our firm's biggest rival. They had offered her a senior partnership position, contingent on her ability to deliver high-value intelligence about our client strategies and case preparations. But there was a problem. As long as I remained at Patterson, Clark and Associates, her value to them was limited by the potential for discovery. So she had created a solution that served multiple purposes. Frame me for corporate espionage, eliminate me as competition within the firm, and demonstrate her willingness to do whatever was necessary to advance her own interests. In one masterful stroke, she had destroyed my career and secured her own future. The resignation letter I found saved in her drafts folder was dated for the day after my termination was expected to be finalized. The subject line, "Once she is out, I am ready," made my stomach turn with revulsion and rage. But it was the personal notes she had kept about our conversations that truly shattered my heart. Detailed records of every vulnerable moment I had shared with her during my suspension, analysis of my emotional state, and how to best manipulate my responses, clinical observations about my predictable reactions, and useful naivety, that read like a scientist studying a particularly interesting laboratory specimen. She had not been comforting me during those dark weeks. She had been studying me, documenting my pain for her own amusement and future reference. I sat in her kitchen for hours, reading through the evidence of her betrayal, until my eyes burned and my heart felt like it had been carved out of my chest with a rusty knife. The sister I had loved and trusted and defended my entire life was a stranger wearing a familiar face. The bond one had thought was unbreakable had been nothing more than a convenient tool she could use to advance her own agenda. But as the initial shock began to fade, it was replaced by something else. Something cold and sharp and focused like a laser beam cutting through steel. If Marissa could play chess, then so could I. I copied every file, every email, every piece of evidence onto a USB drive with the meticulous care of someone building a legal case. Because that was exactly what I was doing. She had spent months constructing the perfect crime, confident that her victim would never fight back, because victims like me were too trusting, too naive, too dependent on family loyalty to see the knife until it was already buried between their shoulder blades. But she had made one crucial miscalculation. She had assumed that I would remain the quiet little sister, who cleaned up her messes, and accepted whatever scraps of affection she chose to throw my way. She had counted on my love for her to blind me to her betrayal, my loyalty to family to prevent me from seeking justice. She was wrong. The next morning, I walked into the offices of the State Bar Association and filed a formal complaint against Marissa Morrison for professional misconduct, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. I provided copies of every email, every file transfer, every piece of evidence that demonstrated her systematic betrayal of client confidentiality and professional ethics. Then I went to the FBI. Corporate espionage involving interstate commerce and multiple law firms fell squarely within federal jurisdiction, and the agents I spoke with were very interested in the comprehensive evidence I had compiled. They launched their own investigation with resources and authority that dwarfed anything Patterson, Clark and Associates could bring to bear. Finally, I returned to my old firm and requested a meeting with Margaret Patterson herself. I have reason to believe that new evidence has come to light regarding the corporate espionage case, I told her assistant with the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards. Evidence that will exonerate me and identify the real perpetrator. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon. I spent the intervening hours preparing my presentation with the same obsessive attention to detail I had once devoted to client cases. Every document was organized, every timeline verified, every piece of evidence cross-referenced and authenticated. When I walked into Margaret's office, the same office where my career had been destroyed just weeks earlier, I carried a briefcase that contained enough evidence to destroy my sister's life as thoroughly as she had destroyed mine. "Margaret," I began, my voice steady and professional despite the hurricane of emotions raging in my chest. "I am here to present evidence that will prove my innocence and identify the person who has been systematically betraying this firm's clients for months." I opened my briefcase and began laying out the files with the methodical precision of a prosecutor presenting a case to a jury. Margaret's expression shifted from skeptical indifference to shocked disbelief, to cold fury as the scope of Marissa's betrayal became clear. "Your sister," Margaret said finally, her voice heavy with disgust and disappointment. Your own sister orchestrated this entire conspiracy to frame you for her crimes. Yes, I replied simply. And I have provided copies of all this evidence to the State Bar Association and the FBI. I assume they will be contacting you soon to coordinate their investigations. The next 48 hours passed in a whirlwind of phone calls, emergency meetings, and hastily scheduled press conferences as the truth about Marissa's betrayal spread through the legal community like wildfire. Patterson, Clark and Associates moved quickly to distance themselves from the scandal and demonstrate their commitment to ethical practices. My suspension was lifted immediately, accompanied by a formal apology and an offer of partnership consideration that reflected both their gratitude for my role in exposing the conspiracy and their desperation to repair their damaged reputation. But I was not in my office when the final act of justice played out. I was in the lobby, sitting in the same chair where I had waited during Marissa's testimony, watching as history repeated itself with cruel poetic symmetry. The conference room doors opened, and she emerged flanked by the same security guards who had escorted me from the building weeks earlier. But this time, she was not playing the role of grieving sister forced to watch her family member's destruction. This time, she was the disgraced attorney whose crimes had been exposed for the world to see. Her eyes found mine across the lobby, and I saw the exact moment when she realized that I had beaten her at her own game. The shock, the disbelief, the grudging respect of one chess master acknowledging a superior opponent. All of it flickered across her face in rapid succession. But there was something else there too. Something that might have been relief. As if some part of her was glad that the elaborate charade was finally over, and she no longer had to pretend to be the loving sister she had never actually been. How? She asked as the guards paused near my chair, her voice carrying the same curiosity she might have expressed about a particularly elegant legal argument. I learned from the best, I replied, meeting her gaze with the steady confidence of someone who had discovered strength she never knew she possessed. You taught me that family means nothing if it stands in the way of what you want. You taught me that loyalty is just weakness waiting to be exploited. You taught me that sometimes the only way to survive is to become someone you never thought you could be. She nodded slowly, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth that was equal parts admiration and regret. I underestimated you, she said simply. I should have known that anyone who shared my DNA would eventually learn to fight fire with fire. The difference between us, I said, rising from my chair to stand face to face with the woman who had raised me and destroyed me and ultimately made me stronger than I ever imagined possible, is that I only became ruthless in service of justice. You were born that way. The security guards resumed their escort toward the exit, but just before they reached the doors, Marissa called back over her shoulder. I hope it was worth it, little sister. I hope destroying me was everything you dreamed it would be. I considered her question seriously, weighing the satisfaction of justice against the grief of losing the last family member I had truly loved. It was not about destroying you, I called back, my voice carrying clearly across the marble lobby that had witnessed both our rises and our falls. It was about saving myself from someone who would have kept destroying me until there was nothing left. The doors closed behind her, and I never saw my sister again. The State Bar Association revoked her license to practice law. The FBI charged her with multiple federal crimes relating to corporate espionage and fraud. Hartwell and Associates, faced with their own investigation for receiving stolen confidential information, rescinded their job offer and cooperated fully with law enforcement to minimize their own legal exposure. Marissa pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence of 3 years in federal prison and lifetime prohibition from practicing law in any jurisdiction. The judge who sentenced her noted that her crimes were made particularly heinous by her betrayal of family trust and her systematic destruction of an innocent person's career and reputation. I was not present for her sentencing. By that time, I had moved to a new city and accepted a position with a firm that specialized in representing victims of corporate fraud and professional misconduct. It seemed fitting that my sister's betrayal had led me to a career dedicated to helping others who had been victimized by people they trusted. The work was satisfying in ways I had never expected. Each case I won, each client I helped obtain justice, each corrupt professional I exposed felt like a small victory against the darkness that had nearly consumed me. I discovered that I had a gift for seeing through elaborate deceptions and uncovering hidden truths. Skills I had developed during my own ordeal and honed through painful experience. Years passed before I could think about Marissa without feeling the sharp edge of betrayal cutting through my chest. More years passed before I could acknowledge that, in her own twisted way, she had given me a gift by showing me exactly who I was when everything else was stripped away. I was not the quiet little sister who cleaned up other people's messes. I was not the dependable one who accepted whatever scraps of affection were thrown my way. I was not the naive victim who could be manipulated and destroyed by someone with more cunning and fewer scruples. I was someone who could stare into the abyss of family betrayal and choose justice over loyalty, truth over comfort, strength over victimhood. I was someone who could take the worst thing that had ever happened to me and transform it into the foundation for a career dedicated to protecting others from similar predators. I was someone who had learned that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones who know exactly where to aim their knives, because they helped you choose where to be vulnerable. But I was also someone who had learned that survival sometimes requires becoming someone you never thought you could be, and that strength often emerges from the ashes of everything you thought you knew about yourself and the people you loved. The sister who had raised me was gone, destroyed by her own choices and the consequences of her betrayal. The career I had built was gone, replaced by something more meaningful and personally satisfying than I had ever imagined possible. The naive young woman who had believed that family loyalty was sacred was gone, replaced by someone who understood that love without boundaries becomes complicity in your own destruction. In the end, Marissa had set out to destroy me so completely that I would never recover, never pose a threat to her ambitions, never again cast a shadow that might dim her shine. Instead, she had forged me into someone stronger, wiser, and more resilient than the person she had tried to eliminate. She had taught me that blood is not thicker than betrayal, that family can be the source of your greatest wounds, and that sometimes the person pulling you out of the fire really is the one who lit the match. But she had also taught me that justice is possible, that truth has power, and that the quiet little sister who cleans up other people's messes can learn to make some pretty devastating messes of her own when the situation calls for it. I never forgave her for what she did to me, but I eventually became grateful for who I became, because of what she did to me. And in the end, that was a victory more complete than any revenge I could have planned. If this story of betrayal, justice, and transformation resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family, loyalty, and the strength that emerges from our darkest moments. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories that remind us we are never as powerless as we might believe, even when those closest to us become our greatest enemies.